Respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Between the city of Najaf and the city of Kufa, there are a number of blessed and divine maqamat and masajid that have been revered and honored by the A'immah, Imams of Ahlul Bayt, the Anbiya, and in essence honored and revered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of such maqamat or one of such masajid is the Masjid Sahla, the great Masjid of Sahla, in which we are honored and blessed to be in today. Masjid Sahla is a mosque that is highly revered in throughout our Islamic traditions. You have narrations that speak about how Masjid Sahla has been revered by the Anbiya, how Masjid Sahla was revered by the A'immah, Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and how Masjid Sahla is going to play a central role during the Dhuhr of the 12th Imam, and indeed even in the events leading up to the Day of Judgment. But however, in regards to the adama of Masjid Sahla, the importance of reciting Masjid Sahla, we have a tradition which is narrated by Maulana Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, where he says, لو إني كنت بالقرب منكم ما صليت صلاة إلا فيه. Imam as-Sadiq, in a part of his narration, to elaborate on the importance and the divinity, the grandeur of Masjid Sahla, says that had I been a dweller or a resident of the city of Kufa, I would not recite my prayers in any other place except in Masjid Sahla. Allahu Akbar. This is Imam Ja'far, Sadiq Ali Muhammad. If a Ma'soom Imam says that I shall not prefer to pray in any other place except in Masjid Sahla, if I was from the residents of Kufa, shows us the importance attached to this mosque, and in reality the importance attached to reciting Salat in this mosque. For this reason you find that a number of pilgrims, when they come to perform their ziyarat and to visit Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, they make it a point to visit Masjid Sahla at least once and to recite sets of prayers within this grand mosque. Apart from the importance of reciting prayers within this mosque, you find that this mosque, in terms of its divinity, has a number of particularities attached to it. Number one, this is one of the places, the land of Masjid Sahla. This piece of earth is one of the most beloved pieces of earth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Notice this hadith that is again narrated to us, a part of this tradition narrated to us by Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, where he says, وَهُوَ مِنَ الْبُقَاءَ الَّتِي أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ أَن يُدَّعَ فِيهِ. This land of Masjid al-Kufa, it is one of those pieces of earth in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that He is supplicated from here. Ya'ni, if there is a place where du'as are mustajab, then the blessedness, the purity of this land is such that Allah loves that people supplicate, His slaves supplicate to Him from here. And this shows us that Masjid Sahla is a place to come and supplicate in order for people to have their hajat, their du'as and their legitimate desires to be fulfilled. And the Imam then goes on again to elaborate the divinity of Masjid Sahla, where he goes on to say, وَمَا مِنْ يَوْمٍ وَلَا لَيْلَ إِلَّا وَالْمَلَائِكَةَ تَزُورُ هَذَا الْمَسْجِدِ يَعْبُدُونَ اللَّهَ فِيهِ. Imam as-Sadiq goes on to say that there is not a single day and not a single night that passes except that the angels descend down from the heavens to visit Masjid al-Kufa. Yani they perform the ziyarah of Masjid al-Kufa. وَيَعْبُدُونَ اللَّهَ فِيهِ, and they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within this mosque. And truthfully speaking, the Za'ir, when he, from the very first step that he takes into Masjid al-Sahla, he feels that he is encompassed by this atmosphere of divinity and this atmosphere of spirituality. The fact that you are surrounded by angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it in the day, be it in the night, coming to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person senses this aura within him that he is in the presence of the malaika. Indeed, this is from one of the most fascinating mosques that we have within our faith. Furthermore, to extend on the adama and the greatness and the divinity associated to Masjid al-Kufa, Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, ما أتاه مكروب قط يصلي فيه فدعا إلا فرج الله عنه. Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Mawla al-Muwahhideen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi says that there is not a single distressed person who comes to Masjid al-Sahla, recites a 2 rakat salat and supplicates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall deliver salvation for him and provide an ease to all the trials and tribulations that he is suffering. A promise that is granted by Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is Qasimun Nari wal Jannah, in regards to the greatness of Masjid al-Sahla. Furthermore, you find that Masjid al-Sahla plays a strategic role when it comes to the end of life on earth. Ajib. We have a narration that goes from Imam As-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, where he says, وَهُوَ مِن كُوفَانٍ, talking about Masjid al-Sahla, he says, and it is considered to be from the city of Kufa, or it is within the city of Kufa. وَفِيهِ يُنْفَخُ فِي السُّورِ. Imam As-Sadiq says, and it is from Masjid al-Sahla that the trumpet will be blown. This trumpet where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about it within the Quran. وَنُفِخَ فِي السُّورِ. The blowing of the trumpet is that occurrence, that incident which will then commemorate the commencement of the day of judgment, the resurrection of the people from their graves and their standing up and their alignment within the mahshar, and the beginning of the divine justice to be dispensed amongst the people, the receiving of rewards of going into Jannah or punishment, wal ayadu billah, going into Nar Jahannam, wal ayadu billah. The commencement of this day of judgment begins with the blowing of the trumpet. And Imam As-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi says the trumpet will be blown from Masjid al-Sahla. Therefore, respected viewers, is important. I remind myself and I remind myself as I remind you as well, that it is important that when we come to Masjid al-Sahla, that we take time to contemplate over the reality of the day of judgment and how we will have to face for and be answerable for the actions that we performed on this earth. Actions that we perform in regards to halal and haram have consequences. Actions that we perform in regards to the rights of other creations, we are answerable for these on the day of judgment. And that ceremony of divine justice, the commemoration through the blowing of the trumpet, shall take place in this mosque. There are a number of maqamat within Masjid al-Sahla that are of divine importance, 7 maqamat in particular, and with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we shall visit each and every one of these maqamat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. From the maqamat within the great mosque of Masjid al-Sahla, we have the maqam of Maulana Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. And behind me we have this maqam which is preserved as being the place of worship which was adopted by Imam al-Sajjad within Masjid al-Sahla. It is narrated by the historians that upon returning back to the city of Medina al-Munawwara after the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada and after imprisonment in Sham at the hands of Yazid ibn Muawiyah la'anatullahi alayh, when Imam Sajjad returned back to Medina, due to the intensity and the situation at the time, Imam Sajjad had moved his place of residence from the city of Medina towards the outskirts, and he would be living in isolation, you could say, a type of an isolation or in seclusion within the deserts in the outskirts of Medina, to be away from the eye of the people of Medina, and such that he is not under the limelight, if you could say, of Bani Umayyah, who was looking for any excuse to go on and oppress, persecute and execute the Imam. They were definitely not satisfied with the tragedies and the crimes that they performed inside of Karbala. For this reason, Imam al-Sajjad, it is narrated by historians, took up a residence in isolation within the outskirts in the deserts of Medina. And it is from here, or during this period, that Imam al-Sajjad traveled to the city of Kufa in the land of Iraq a number of times. And one of the times that he visited Kufa, he went and he visited Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and recited the very famous ziyarah that we have today in the books of Adiyah, the likes of Mafatihul Jinan, known as Ziyarat Aminullah. This was taught to us by Maulana Imam Zainul Abidin when he came to visit and perform the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In one of these many journeys that Imam al-Sajjad performed, he would come to Masjid Sahla, and in particular in this spot of Masjid Sahla behind me. And it is here that Imam Sajjad would conduct a lot of his worships, a lot of his prayers, a lot of his salawat. He was given the title Sayyidus Sajideen, yani the leader or the masters of those people who prostrate for extended times. The titles of Imam Sajjad, Dhu Thafinat, in that due to his intense and prolonged prostrations, every now and then during the year, he would cut off the skin from his forehead and his knees that had become sore due to the extended sujood prostrations that he would perform. Therefore, we have within our books of history that Maulana Imam al-Sajjad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi would come here and he would adopt this particular place in Masjid al-Sahla for his ibadat and his ta'at. It goes, and it is befitting to say over here that it is important for each and every one of us to take up Sahifa Sajjadiyah, which is a compilation of the supplications that were recited by Imam Zainul Abidin. We adopt Sahifa Sajjadiyah, we make it a part of our daily lives. We are able to worship, seek inspiration, and indeed learn about the religion, the reality of Tawheed, and the position of Ahlul Bayt. All these ma'arif, all these treasures of knowledge are encompassed and hidden within these du'as. It is incumbent upon us, advice to myself and advice to yourself, to take Sahifa Sajjadiyah as a part of our daily lives, and through it we are able to seek proximity towards Allah and Ahlul Bayt. From amongst the maqamat within Masjid al-Sahla, behind me we have the maqam of the Anbiya and the Salihin. And it is narrated in the traditions that there is not a single prophet sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except that they have recited salat in Masjid al-Sahla. And this is a maqam that is attributed to the spot in which each and every one of the Anbiya have recited salat. In fact, we also have hadith that emanates from our Ma'soom Imam that states that within Masjid al-Sahla there is a heavenly stone of Zabarjad, and within this there is the pictures of all the Anbiya and pictures of all the successors of all the 124,000 prophets. And this is a heavenly stone that contains these images in a divine manner, and this heavenly stone in itself is buried somewhere here underneath Masjid al-Kufa. This in itself is one of the treasures that will be uncovered upon the dhuhur of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman, and it is through this that you will find that a lot of the treasures of the earth in terms of the legacy of human history and legacies involving ideology will be uncovered by the Imam. Again, from the adab and the akhlaq of the mosque, it is recommended that as we visit each and every one of these maqamat, that a 2 rakat salat is recited here and a particular dua is recited at each and every one of the maqamat. From amongst the maqamat within Masjid al-Sahla, behind me we have the maqam of Nabiullah, Nabi Ibrahim Khalilullah alayhi salam. And you find that the life of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is marked with affiliation to various grand mosques within Islam. We find that it is Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam who is involved in the construction of the Kaaba, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We find again that Nabi Ibrahim took Masjid al-Kufa to be a place of worship, and he has a maqam of salat within this grand mosque, which was also a transit point, if you could say, for the Holy Prophet of Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam on his journey of Mi'raj and Isra. Furthermore, our traditions have that at a certain point in his life, Nabiullah Ibrahim alayhi salam had taken this place within Masjid Sahla to be his residence. He lived over here, worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, and it is from this place that he went into war with the Amalika. Now in every maqam within Masjid Sahla, we have from the etiquette of the mosque that a 2 rakat salah is prayed, and there's a particular dua that is to be recited at each and every one of these maqams. Every dua is important and every dua is special, but you find that something stands out within the dua that is to be recited at the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, and it is important for you and I to contemplate over the words of this dua. Let me read you a part of this dua that is recited at the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma bihaqqi hadhihi al-buq'ati al-sharifa wa bihaqqi man ta'abbada laka fih qad alimta hawaiji fasalli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad waqdiha. In the first part of this dua, which is to be recited at the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim, we perform or we ask for the fulfillment of our desires through the intermediary, by seeking intermediary or seeking the wasila of 3. Number 1, we ask for the fulfillment of our desires through the intercession of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, the Ahlul Bayt. Number 2, we seek intercession wa bihaqqi man ta'abbada laka fiha. We seek intercession by the person who worshipped you in this place, yani the intercession of Nabi Ibrahim. 2. Number 3, Allahumma bihaqqi hadhihi al-buq'ata sharifa. Ya Allah, I ask you by the divinity and by the honor of this by the divinity and by the honor of this blessed land, that you fulfill my desires. We intercede by the divinity of this land to seek our legitimate desires from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last part of this dua, look at what we recite, and it's important that we contemplate on this. Allahumma ahyini ma kanat al-hayatu khayran li wa amitni idha kanat al-wafatu khayran li. O Allah, grant me a long life so long as it is in my benefit to have a long life. Ya'ni, O Allah, grant me a long life if only and only if I'm going to use this life in your obedience. Wa amitni idha kanat al-wafat khayran li. Ya Allah, if death is better for me, then grant me death. Ya'ni, it is better for death to take me than for me to live a sin of life in disobedience towards Allah. Look at the zone, look at the ma'rifah which a person is supposed to have, the level of iman, taqwa, what his mindset, what his approach to life and death should be. These are attestations that we make in divine places like these. And then he goes on to say, the dua goes on to say, ala muwalati awliyaik wa mu'adati a'daik. Ya Allah, make my life and my death to be such that in either one of these cases I'm always in a state of love with those who you love, yani your chosen selected people, the Anbiya and the Ahlul Bayt. Wa mu'adati a'daik, and let me always be in a state of opposition towards your enemy. You find within this dua in the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim, as we ask for our hajat, from the ma'arif and the treasures of knowledge, concepts of tawalli and tabarri. Waf'al bima anta ahlu. Ya Allah, you do unto me from that of your status which you are deserving. Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. From within the maqamat, within the grand Masjid Sahla, we have the maqam of Nabi Idris alayhi salam. In that this is the place within Masjid Sahla that Nabiullah Idris had taken up as a place of dwelling and a primary place of residence. Nabi Idris alayhi salam is the grandfather of Nabi Nuh. Therefore, you get an idea by just looking at this at how ancient this place of the mosque is as a site, and truthfully speaking, it's remarkable and a miracle, to be honest with you, on how these ancient sites are preserved with all this accuracy within them. In any case, the historians narrate that Nabiullah Idris was the grandfather of Nabi Nuh. It is from here that Nabiullah Idris actually contributed to the growth of civilization by disseminating a number of different types of knowledges. It is narrated by the historians that it is Nabiullah Idris who invented the art of sewing or the art of stitching garments. And before the time of Nabi Idris, garments or clothing was not worn in the way that we know, where two pieces or multiple pieces of cloth are stitched together in order to conceal or cover the body. It is Nabiullah Idris alayhi salam who came up with the art of stitching and then taught it to other people. In fact, we have within the traditions indications that Nabiullah Idris used to sit in his house and he used to stitch or sew from here. This is one. On the other hand, we also have within our traditions that it is Nabiullah Idris alayhi salam who was the first person to disseminate knowledge within the field of astronomy. The calculations of the stars and the study of the cosmos in itself was a science that was taught by Nabi Idris alayhi salam, and all this teaching happened from this divine place of residence known as the maqam of Nabiullah Idris alayhi salam. From amongst the most divine and grand places within the great Masjid Sahla lies the maqam of the awaited savior of mankind, Maulana Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. And we are standing at the maqam. You see the shrine-like engagement behind me is the place that is dedicated to Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. And in fact, it is narrated that he was seen to have been in a state of salat over here, and that he actually commanded one of the scholars to take care in regards to the preservation and the construction of Masjid Sahla as a grand mosque. We have within our traditions over here that, and when what is meant by traditions in that scholarly work and historical narrations that are passed down to us from scholars to scholars, it is narrated in regards to the importance and the history of this place that the scholar of the time, Ayatollah al-Uzma Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum Rahmatullah alayh, was blessed to have an encounter with Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman here in Masjid al-Kufa, and this was a spot where the Imam was once seen. As you may know, it is practical and it is possible for a person to be blessed and to be honored by meeting Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman within the Ghaibat al-Kubra, as has been attested by a number of scholars, including Ayatollah Mahdi, Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum. For it is narrated that he met the 12th Imam here, and the Imam was seen on this very spot in a state of prayer, and therefore in honor of Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman, this place was built and dedicated towards him. And it is incidences like these and places like these that reassert and establish our yaqeen and our faith within the existence of our 12th Imam, and more importantly the fact that even though he is in a state of occultation, he lives amongst us, and it is possible for a person who has reached a level of purity and sincerity to be honored and blessed with meetings with the Imams. Meetings with the Imams are divided into two. Sometimes a person is able to recognize the Imam while speaking to him or while meeting with him, and many times a person is honored to meet with the Imam, but he doesn't recognize the Imam and only realizes this after the Imam has left or after the incident or the occurrence is already over. You find that it has been within the seerah of our virtuous ulama to uphold the rights of Masjid Sahla and to come for its visitation on every Tuesday night, and in particular seek the intercession of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. You have scholars going as far back as Sayyid Ibn Tawus, who speak about the importance of visiting Masjid al-Sahla on Tuesday nights. And indeed, if a person with a true and a sincere intention was to uphold the visitation of Masjid al-Sahla for 40 continuous Tuesdays, it is narrated that a person who does this amal is blessed at one point to visit Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. Ayatollah Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum rahmatullah alayhi himself was honored to visit Imam al-Hujjah a number of times, once over here in Masjid al-Sahla and another time in Karbala al-Muqaddas, where it is very famously narrated that on the day of Ashura, Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum rahmatullah alayhi was in Karbala on the day of Ashura, looking over at the masses and the pilgrims of Imam al-Hussein in their thousands, lovers, running bare feet and hitting their heads and shouting Wa Hussein and Wa Husseina. And at one point, Ayatollah Marja Taqleed, Ayatollah Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, was seen to have removed his amama, to remove his abba, and in his old age he went running into this azah, beating his face and his head, shouting Wa Hussein and Wa Husseina until he fainted. The people around Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum rushed to him. They sprinkled water on him until he regained consciousness. And then what we understand is they kind of rebuked him. And they said to him, you know, Sayyidina, you are a marja taqleed. It does not befit you to frantically run and chant Ya Hussein and beat yourself like this with the regular common people. Ayatollah Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, Ayatollah Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum tearfully looked at them and said, and how can I not run bare feet and beat my head and face in grief when I saw my master Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman in this state of azab? This is one of the very many scholars in very many incidences where they were blessed to actually visit Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. We also have within the seerah of the ulama that Ayatollah Mar'ashi al-Najafi rahmatullah alayh was compliant with visiting Masjid al-Sahla for 40 Tuesdays, and he was blessed to visit Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. As well, we have from amongst the scholars marhum Ayatollah Muhammad Rida al-Shirazi. He mentions that his father marhum Imam al-Rahil Ayatollah al-Udhma Muhammad al-Shirazi was also honored with visiting Masjid al-Sahla for 40 Tuesdays and was blessed to visit Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. And therefore you find that it has been within the seerah of the ulama and the seerah of the virtuous people to try as much as possible to uphold the rights of Masjid al-Sahla, to come and visit Masjid al-Sahla, particularly on Tuesday nights, and to pay tribute to Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. This is a place where it is imperative for us to renew our oath of allegiance with the awaited Savior of our time. It is important that we seek forgiveness for the sins that we commit, which perhaps, wal-ayadu billah, are a reason for the prolongment of the ghaibah. This is a place where a person comes and gets perspective on his life. This is a place where a person comes and prioritizes his life, where he makes an oath and he makes a pledge that the Sharia, the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, take a priority over everything in life. And through this, inshaAllah, we are able to register our support as the Ansar and the Ashab of the 12th Imam. And indeed, he is the Waliyul Amr. It is through him, inshaAllah, that our prayers are accepted, our ibadat are accepted, our hajat are accepted, and every type of khair and barakah that a person can ever imagine to have, it can only be sought through the blessings of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. And this is the place to seek for this. Behind me we have the maqam of Abdul Saleh al-Khidr, the pious and virtuous wali from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has been given an exceptionally long life and has been in the presence and the companion of the Anbiya, the Awsiya and the Awliya. Nabiullah Abdul Salih al-Khidr is one of those virtuous people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prolonged his life until the day of judgment, and the narrations indicate that Abdul Salih al-Khidr shall indeed be part of the great movement of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. Not too long ago or not too far from the maqam of Abdul Salih al-Khidr is the maqam of Imam Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman, which we just visited. And it is also befitting to mention over here that upon the dhuhur of our 12th Imam and the establishment of a global government through which peace and justice will prevail on the earth after it has been filled with oppression and tyranny, this Mubarak mosque, this great mosque, the great mosque of Sahla, will then be the place of the residence for Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. Yani, upon the establishment of his government, the Imam together with his family will take up the Masjid al-Sahla to be their residence, and Masjid al-Sahla will also be the Baytul Mal. Yani, it will be the place of which you can think about as the central bank for this single universal government which is led by the Ma'soom Imam. And on the other hand, the traditions tell us that upon the dhuhur of the 12th Imam and the establishment of his government, Masjid al-Kufa will be taken up as the high court. This is where the functions of universal justice will be dispensed from within Masjid al-Kufa. And the narrations also go on to indicate that upon the dhuhur of the 12th Imam and the establishment of his government, the first Salatul Jum'ah to ever be recited by a Ma'soom Imam after Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam will be Imam al-Hujjah within Masjid al-Kufa. Therefore, you find both these mosques, Al-Sahla and Al-Kufa, both these divine mosques have great roles and great importances, have a great importance and have great roles when it comes to the dhuhur of the 12th Imam. Coming back to Abdul Salih al-Khidr, who will be a part of the movement of Imam al-Hujjah, you find that his long life serves as an example of the possibility of a prolongment of life for any other person. Then how about for an Imam who is ordained and appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We also have within the narrations narrated by Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi that whenever Nabi Khidr is mentioned, he is aware of his mentioning, he is aware that people have remembered him. And Imam al-Baqir goes on to say, so whenever you do mention Abdul Salih al-Khidr, then send salams to him, for indeed he is aware of your conversations where he is mentioned, and he replies back to the salams. The narrations also mention that Abdul Salih al-Khidr attends the Manasikul Hajj every year. He is present in the lands of Arafah. He is present performing the tawaf around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he looks at the mu'mineen, yani the lovers and the followers of Ahlul Bayt, and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the supplications and to forgive the sins of those pilgrims from the lovers of Ahlul Bayt who come to Baytullah al-Haram to perform the Manasik al-Hajj. This over here denotes the maqam of Abdul Salih al-Khidr, where at a point he had taken up this place as his residence. Perhaps even till today it is a place of his residence, but his presence is concealed from within our eyes, and the knowledge for this is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is also befitting to note over here that Abdul Salih al-Khidr was ordained with Ilmul Ghaib, despite him not being from amongst the Anbiya or from the A'imma. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has purified and selected a person such as Abdul Salih al-Khidr because of his piety and his chastity, then what about a person who is ordained to be a leader and a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How could they not have Ilmul Ghaib? There are many incidences of Ilmul Ghaib that are possessed by Abdul Salih al-Khidr, which are manifest even within the Quran, and in particular the incident where Abdul Salih al-Khidr was in the company of Nabi Musa, or where Nabi Musa was accompanying him, and Abdul Salih al-Khidr then damaged the boat. He damaged one boat, and he tore down one wall, and he took away the life of a young child. And Nabi Musa was perplexed by these events, and he was not aware of the wisdom. And when Abdul Salih al-Khidr announced to him the reasons, in that the boat, a small damage would save the boat from being usurped by a tyrant leader. It could easily be fixed and then be used as a source of sustenance for the owner. He broke down a wall such that underneath there was a treasure for the children who were made orphans upon the death of their parents, and how Abdul Salih al-Khidr had taken away the life of the child because he would grow up to be an oppressor. The fact that he had knowledge of the unseen, of the future, and took steps in the present and performed actions in the present, even though Nabiullah Musa was not aware of the wisdom, you find that within this incident, Abdul Salih al-Khidr is appointed to teach Nabi Musa and to indicate towards him that there are those amongst us who have ilm of the ghaib and the unseen. Behind me we have the maqam of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi within the grand mosque of Masjid al-Sahla. The historians mention that on a number of occasions Mansur al-Dawaniki had actually, the Abbasid leader la'natullah alayh, had actually summoned Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam to Baghdad from the holy city of Medina. And while the Imam was being summoned from Medina towards Baghdad, he stopped over in Kufa, and the Imam was seen to have stopped here at Masjid al-Sahla and to be reciting a 2 rakat salat at this very spot that you see marked behind me. And the Imam himself had commanded his companions to uphold the recitation of prayers, be them obligatory or the recommended prayers over here in Masjid al-Kufa. It is widely narrated that while Imam as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi was here in the city of Kufa, he came to know about an elderly woman. This woman was walking down the street and she happened to trip over a stone, in the process injuring her foot and falling down. And like a number of people and lovers of Ahlul Bayt do, whenever negativity befalls upon them, they try and ward off this calamity by invoking the damnation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. So as this woman fell down, she tripped over the stone, fell down, injured herself, injured her toe. She cried out, Allahumma lan qatili Fatima alayhi salam. Oh Allah, send your damnation, eternal damnation upon the killers of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And as she happened to say this, there were guards from the regime of Bani Abbas who overheard her say this. So they arrested her and they imprisoned her for invoking damnation on the killers of the daughter of the Holy Prophet. And one of the companions came running to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he said, Yabna Rasulullah, this is what happened on the street, and this woman has been arrested and has been imprisoned because she invoked eternal damnation on the killers of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The narrations mention that Imam as-Sadiq began to weep and he hastened towards Masjid al-Sahla. He then came to this very spot and he recited a 2 rakat salat, and in a state of sujood began to weep until the tears began to flow down his blessed beard and they began to wet the sand upon which he was performing sajda. And he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant salvation and relief for this woman from the hands of these tyrannical leaders, and for her to be given freedom from imprisonment. The narration mentions that as soon as the Imam finished supplicating for this woman, raised his head from sujood, it was not moments later until the companions came running to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, giving him the good news that the woman has been freed from the prison of Bani Abbas. And this is a place where the dua of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam was mustajab, number one. Number two, is also recommended that from within the etiquettes of Masjid al-Sahla, those of us who are blessed to be here on a Tuesday night, that we recite a 2 rakat salat between particularly the salat of Maghrib and the salat of Isha, and this is for your legitimate desires and supplications to be accepted.